Welcome back to Chop's Garage. The Fiat 500 from BCA with the banged up wing. Now you demanded it, you said I wasn't allowed to buy a wing for it, I had to repair the one that was on it and I had to rattle can it. So you demanded it, let's get on it. Right, this is a slow bit again, Fiat 500 wings off. There's a bolt here, and there's a bolt up there, and then there's all this sealant here, and the sealant's used to hold the wing in here, and it also covers over the bolts. They put it on after the bolt, so you've got to now get all this cleaned off in order to be able to actually get to the bolts and get them undone. Then you've got to cut all the sealant all the way down here so you can pull the wing away. First pass with filler. What you're looking for here is your high spot. So where the metal's showing is going to be likely to be your high spot. So I go around with the hammer with the slight point on it and dap the areas, run my hand over it, dap the areas where it feels like it's sitting a bit high, knock them back a little bit, and then it'll get a second coat of filler on it. Just take your time and run your hand over it when it's clean. Run your hand over it and just feel, and your fingertips will tell you whether things are right or wrong. And don't ignore it because it'll always show in the paint. So then just keep building it up We won't worry about trying to get this line in perfectly for the moment. Obviously I'm not going to leave it that sharp, it should be a smooth line there. And the trick is keep going over to the other side, have a look at the other side. Actually looking at it, that is quite a sharp edge, isn't it? Actually I think it is quite sharp, so we want to keep that sharpness there and then just roll the edge of it slightly. We're not going to have a lot of filler in here, as you can see. It's going to be a very minor amount of filler. We kept the original panel. You can see straight away my panel gaps are bang on by keeping the original panel. If this had been a pattern part, I'd have been buggering around with it till the cows came home trying to get these lines, gap here and gap here, all correct. But they're all even all the way around, and that's the advantage of keeping the original panel. Right guys, so we've done second pass of the filler. As you can see now, I've got less of those high spots. This is mostly primer. There's only one spot we've gone through the bare metal again, just there. Tiny bit there. So I'm happy that I haven't got any high spots now, other than I want to spit a little bit more on that edge there. We've defined the gap down the side of the door here. A little bit of sanding to do on the edge there. We've got a nice even gap all the way down. Nice even gap around the bonnet there. And we've defined the line here on the edge of the wing. Just got to shape it just a touch here. It does actually go wider and then narrower a little bit. So yeah, just find that just a little bit more, get in here. To get in case anybody's wondering, when you fill in these gaps with the filler, ideally don't, but if you do, get your spreader and get your sandpaper on the edge of your spreader and just run it in that crack back and forth, and just take your time, make a nice smooth. You don't want to crack filler, so just take your time and do it nice and gently. So we'll do that, tidy that up, put a bit more here, and then it's time to filler primer it up. And it's only when you start putting paint on you really see how you've got it. But I think again, you know, on this car being white, one, you get away with a lot more, and obviously we're not talking about a 10-15 grand motor here, we're talking about something that's about 4 grand, 4.5 grand. So we're not looking for absolute perfection, and I'm not a bodywork man, so we're looking for the best job we can do, where you can stand at sort of this distance in the car and you're not seeing ripples all over it and the colour blends in nicely. That's what we're looking for goal wise. But you can see again, using the original panel just means the fit is so much better. Seriously, if this was an aftermarket, we'd have a wider gap at the top and the bottom, we'd have gap here, gap there, we'd be fiddling with it for hours to get it straight. So repairing this one, although it might seem like a lot of work, is actually quicker in the long run. So now what I've done is taken a Scotch pad and scotched all the area around where I've prepped, and down here into the bumper and out here into the door. I've gone a bit higher here because remember I told you there's previous poor paint up there, so I've sanded that back. The idea of this is you need to paint to adhere to the areas around it. Even your blend-in areas, you need the paint to adhere. Now, this is a 800 grit, 6 to 800 I think this one is, the red one. I'd normally use a grey one, which is about 1200 grit, but I've run out of those at the moment. So you want to do a much wider area than you think, because once you start painting, you know, once I've got my primer up to here, I'm going to be into colour here, aren't I? And same over here, once I've put my primer in and then my colour, my fade out, I'm to here. So do a much wider area than you think you need, because you will run out of space quickly. So yeah, now I've got to mask up so that we can, I've got to clean this off first. So after you've scotched it, you need to give it another clean. And then I will mask up, give it another clean, and then we'll get the filler primer on. So the first coat is filler primer, a thick primer, to fill in any pinholes and stuff in the filler and smooth this area out. What's very important before I go any further is I put a bit of plastic primer on the area of the bumper here that needed work, because if I don't do this, a normal primer can crack up quite a lot on plastics. So I just give it a little dust of the plastic primer first. If you remember, I'm doing this corner too here, so I'm going to give that little dust of plastic primer as well before I forget, and then carry on masking up. So then when I come through with the filler primer, I can put the filler primer on the plastic, but it'll be adhering to the plastic primer. So we've got the filler primer on. That's the second coat. Probably get a third and a fourth coat into this as well. I'm gonna have to sand it back. I've got a little sag already, just that might level out in a second. A little sag there. shape is looking right. You can tell with the filler primer it gives a bit of shine when you first put it on. Gives you a good idea, never as reflective as the actual paint, but gives you a good idea of how your shape's coming along. And we've got a clean line through there. On the edge of the fender follows that one quite nicely, so that's looking good. This is looking level, so 10 minutes, give it another coat. Just take your time, don't try to lay on too thick too quickly because you will get runs. If you intend on sanding it, that's not a problem, but if you're going to try and put colour on straight away, which you will get a better finish if you sand your primer first, but if you want to put colour on straight away, you can do. You've got to wait 10 minutes to flash off, give it a dust coated colour, and then put your colour on. But if you want the best finish, you want to flat your primer down as well. So we've flatted back all the primer. We've given it a wipe over with the silicone cleaner, sorry, not silicone wipe, you don't want silicone on it. So with the cleaner on it, degreaser and silicone remover. And we've got our can of 1K. So a lot of people ask me exactly what paint it is I use. It's a 1K, 2K is the paint that you use in spray guns that goes off a lot quicker. It chemically hardens itself, whereas this has to air dry. But the thing with 2K, really bad for your lungs, guys. You need to get breathing apparatus for that. You should really get a basic mask when using this 1K, but it's a lot less dangerous. This is also lacquer and colour together. When I do white, I usually do lacquer and colour together because you can get away with it. Normally you'd have to have a colour and a lacquer, but the motor factory will tell you whether you can get away with a ready mix one. This means that I can get it all done in one go. I've never experienced any real problems with it doing it this way. You can still use fade out thinner to fade out your areas of repair. So the first coat will be a very light dust coat because we want to remember we've sanded this primer down and it's now dried, so there won't be any real chemical adhesion between the two surfaces. So what we need to do is lightly spray it on and create a slightly tacky surface. Let that go off, and then when we put the heavier coats on, it's got something to really grab to. If you don't do that and you just lay your coats on without doing that, what will happen is if you put this car out in the sun and a little, you know, and put it out in some hot weather, is you'll find basically your paint will flake straight off because it didn't grab to anything. So take your time. Also, the advantage of putting one dust coat on is if there's any reactions, they're not going to be big reactions because you've only lightly dusted it on, and you can sort of cater for that at all. You know, cater for trying to sort that reaction out without having to deal with very wet paint. So we're going to, I don't know if I mentioned how to do the edge here. Someone did a really bad paint job. You remember I said there was bad paint here? Well, it actually ran across on this edge as well. And what it looked like they'd done is sand it and then put paint on with damp underneath the paint because it had sort of surface rust underneath the paint. I didn't really want to do this because obviously I'm now panel to panel. Again, white you can get away with it, but if needs be I'll have to blend in here later on, but we'll see how we get on with it. But I couldn't leave it like it was, as much as I didn't want to have to go over there, and I didn't really want to have to go up here. I was hoping to stay below this line, but again the paint was too bad there. I'm hoping not to take the colour too far up here so I don't get the two edges again. If you can avoid putting new paint edge to edge, always do it. It might be tempting to spray this whole panel because you've got it masked off, but then you're going to be putting new paint against that old paint. So if you can stop short of it, if I can stop short here and then use my fade out thinner there, there's less chance of you being able to notice the difference between the two paints. So with the cans, obviously really shake them up beforehand. Make sure they're really well mixed and make sure they're warm as well. Not hot because it will vaporize too quickly, but warm. So put a second coat on. With this second coat, I've gone in this direction, then in this direction. I'm trying to get a little bit more coverage with this coat, but I'm still not concerning myself with making sure it's completely covered because we don't want to create any runs. Now at this point, take a note of what time it is and don't touch it again for at least 10 minutes, guys. It's very easy to get tempted and jump in and start putting more paint on straight away. You've got to leave it 10 minutes. What you're waiting for is you're waiting for the chemicals and the gas within the paint or whatever it is to come out and evaporate off, so you're ready for your next coat. If you do it again straight away heavy, what happens is you trap those gases and chemicals in, and then that's when you get sort of blisters in your paint and bubbling in your paint. And obviously if you do it too heavy, that's when you get runs. So just be patient, note what time it is, wait 10 minutes, find something to do with yourself, don't stand over the car because you'll jump in too early again. Go and do something else for 10 minutes or so, 10 to 15 minutes before you then come back and put more coats on. It's all about taking your time. With the rattle cans, with the guns, you can lay it on heavier, a bit thicker, the 2K dries off a bit quicker, but when you're working with 1K and rattle cans, it's all about taking your time. By the way, I don't think I pointed out, you know that I thought I was going to have to paint the rear bumper here. All those marks were just on the surface, so a T-cut took them out. The only thing I've been left with, this mark here, was a scrape here. I've run a razor blade off to level it out, and then I'll take a brush and I'll touch that in with a little bit of the paint a little bit later on, but that's going to save us a lot of work, not having to paint the rear bumper as well. The rest of the bodywork's pretty clean, so obviously we'll give it all a big polish when that paint's done, because it'll bring up the rest of the paint to match the new paint. Wheels came up all right as well. Let me just show you what I used on the wheels a sec. If you remember when it came in, these wheels were filthy. I used some of Tom's stuff. This was in with a package he sent me from Moonshine, and it's called Purge Wheel Cleaner. I normally use what's the stuff that goes purple and sort of runs off it. I've been using that very regularly, but I thought I'd try this one out because, like I say, Tom sent it to me. Again, it's not a paid promotion, he didn't pay me, he just sent me some out to try, and I said I'd give my honest review on it. So I used this, and it is really strong stuff actually. It takes it straight off. It must be a wheel acid, I think, because oh no, non-acidic. Well, what I will say, if you get it on your hands, it does sting a little bit, so wear rubber gloves. But it cuts right through it really quickly, and all you then have to do is rinse it off. So you spray it on, leave it for a minute or two, rinse it off. I did think I'd have to work it in with a brush because they were really filthy, but actually got it pretty much all out straight away. So yeah, once again, thanks to Tom and Moonshine for sending me that box of stuff out. I've been using it on the cars, and I won't recommend it, but I don't think it's actually good, but this stuff was good. So I think so far my favourite is the Quick Detailer. The Moonshine Quick Detailer is brilliant stuff. I'm loving that. It cleans the cars up super quick without having to wash them down first, and it beads really well. And then after that, I think this Wheel Cleaner, because that's working really well. And my wife is loving the rhubarb and custard wooden air freshener that I got from Moonshine as well. She's got that in her car, she's loving that. So yeah. And as I said before, I think it all comes in glass bottles, so all recyclable. So yeah, thanks again for that stuff, guys. Oh, and don't forget, Moonshine have been mega generous and given me a 25% discount code for you guys to use. So big old discount. Code will be underneath. It's Chops Garage, all one word, I think. Chops Garage, all one word. I'll put it underneath this video, but yeah, it's good stuff, and with 25% off makes it even better buy. So we're on a third coat now. It's a wetter, heavier coat, and we're looking more to get coverage now. You can see here, you can see a line here now. Remember, this is all keyed up matte, and this is now shiny where I'm laying the paint on thicker. So don't panic about that. When I've got the final coat on, we will put the fade out thinner in to level it off, and then it'll all get a machine polish. So it is going to look shinier than the rest of the paintwork, because don't forget, over here is non-keyed up and here is all keyed up, so don't panic about that. Again, don't go crazy trying to get too much coverage on. We'll probably put another 2 or 3 coats on now, and we're not looking for a particular shine on it on any of these coats yet. We'll do that a little bit later on the last coat. We'll do what's known as a wet coat, where we'll lay it on quite heavy. But for the moment, we're just looking to get good coverage, take our time, make sure we've got no reactions. We're much less likely to have a reaction on the later coats if we've allowed these first ones to dry out. You can see we've got a decent line where I had to bang out all those dents and so forth. We've got a decent line. It's kept its shape nicely through there, so that's looking all right. We got rid of that poor paint there, and round here we're looking okay here. I've got to just wait a little bit, get some of this dust off. There's a bit of dust kicked up there. I want to get that off before I do any more coats, so that's looking okay. Ideally, wet the floor around where you're working. That'll keep the dust down. Don't like to do it obviously here in the workshop, but wet the floor. If you're doing it outside in the sun, wet the floor down and keep the dust down for you. But yeah, again, just patience. We'll just wait out a little longer, put some more coat. So we're going to wait another 10 minutes or so before we do another coat. So for your last coat, what you want is this fade out thinner. Pretty much what it says on the tin. Normally you use it with the lacquer when you're doing 2-stage. You can use it with this 1K where the lacquer and the colour is mixed. And basically it fades the two paints out together. So you want a can of this stuff ready to go for your last coat. And you only want to literally dust it on where your new paint meets your old paint. So guys, we've done our final coat and we used our fade out thinner. I say just quickly pass it across, dust it across the edges of where you blend in. Now what we're going to do is let this dry off. This is that stage I always say to you, leave it alone. You can walk around it and you might find imperfections, stuff like that, but there's nothing you can do at this point. You've just got to let it harden and then you can come back to it later and flat it back, and if necessary touch it up. But yeah, best thing to do is just leave it alone. You can see where the fade out thinner has now taken where the matte paint was and blended it in with the new paint. Now obviously this is all going to need wet sanding. It's not with a rattle can, you don't get it massively smooth straight out of the can. But yeah, it'll all need flattened back, but shouldn't touch it really for ideally a couple of days, I'd say, unless you're putting a heat lamp on it. So I'm afraid guys, it's going to have to be the next video before you see how this paint comes out. We're going to have to wet sand, flat it back, and we're going to have to and polish it up. On the camera I'm seeing it looks like that white's different there, but in reality it's actually, I think it's all right, but we'll see when we polish it up. The camera never lies. You can see over here, that's where I did the other section. Again, it's looking not so great now, but remember, this is all not been flatted back yet. This is all flatted to matte, so we've got to flat all this, polish all this up yet. So yeah, next video we'll do that. We'll polish the paint up and see how that's come out, and then we will get on the inside and deal with the stained seats and give it a clean up, and then we'll do its photo shoot ready for sale, and we'll see how it's come out. Thanks for watching as always guys. Hit that subscribe button below if you're interested in seeing what happens next with the car. See you again soon.